My grandmother had married me off to a 50-year-old man who already had 2 children, both much older than me. My 50-year-old husband loved me very much, but I fell in love with his son. However, he hated me, and I would run around doing every little thing for him. One day, no one was home, and I was lying in my room. Suddenly, my husband's son entered my room. I was overjoyed to see him, but what he did to me the moment he came in made the ground slip from beneath my feet. I was married to a 50-year-old man when I was only 16, and what his 50-year-old son did to me was something I could never have imagined even in my wildest dreams. My parents had passed away long ago, and my grandmother had taken me to her house. My uncle and aunt always saw me as a burden, but how could my grandmother abandon an 8-year-old girl? Despite listening to my uncle's complaints, she kept me with her. When my grandmother realized her old bones could no longer bear my weight, instead of leaving me at my uncle's mercy, she began searching for a match for me. But who would marry an orphaned, helpless girl who brought no dowry? That's why the matchmaker started showing me proposals of much older men. At first, my grandmother refused outright, saying, "Ronnie is only 16. How can she marry a man so much older?" But slowly, she realized her health was deteriorating day by day, and my uncle and aunt's attitude hadn't softened even after all these years. So, she made a difficult decision and finalized my marriage to a 50-year-old man. The matchmaker told her that the man's wife had passed away, and he had 2 grown sons. There was no shortage of money or property in the house. She assured my grandmother that Ronnie would live a life of luxury after marriage. After one meeting, my grandmother fixed my marriage with Farouk. He was a 50-year-old government employee. I hadn't seen Farouk. My grandmother only told me he was a bit older. Farouk hadn't made any demands for the wedding, and my grandmother had nothing to give me. So within 4 days, I was sent off empty-handed as Farouk's bride. On the wedding night, when I saw Farouk, it felt like all my dreams had turned to dust. Farouk barely had any hair left on his head, while I was a beautiful 16-year-old girl, a girl who had lost to fate and become the wife of a middle-aged man like Farouk. I could do nothing but cry over my helplessness. Farouk, however, looked at me with such love as if I were the first woman to enter his life. On the very first night, Farouk laid down some rules for living in that house. He told me his sons were unhappy with this marriage, so I should keep my distance from them. I wasn't even allowed to visit my own home, and Farouk made it clear that he would take me to see my grandmother only when he wanted. I couldn't step out of the house or talk to anyone freely. Hearing all these restrictions, I was terrified. I hadn't even lived my life properly yet, and Farouk had already chained me down. Before marriage, I always thought that after getting married, I would escape my uncle and aunt's tyranny, and that whoever I married would give me a peaceful life. Like others, I would have control over my own life and do everything I had dreamed of since childhood. But all my dreams turned to dust. The next morning, when Farouk's 2 sons came to the dining table for breakfast, they were shocked to see me sitting there. When their father introduced me as their new mother, their faces changed color, and they glared at him with hatred. Both of Farouk's sons were very handsome, but the elder one, Ramiz, had captured my heart at first sight. I had never seen such a handsome young man before. He was 3 or 4 years older than me, but his tall, muscular physique left me stunned. Farouk was ordinary-looking. Who knew his sons took after whom? Ramiz angrily told his father, "How could you bring another woman to replace our mother? This girl can never take my mother's place." The argument between father and son went on for a while. Ramiz, being the elder, confronted his father, while Rahim, the younger one, stood silently. Soon, both sons left the house without eating. I watched Ramiz leave from afar. It felt like he took my heart with him. Farouk told me not to worry about Ramiz. He would calm down in a few days. It was just temporary anger. But after Farouk left for work, I spent the whole day thinking about Ramiz. I had fallen in love with him at first sight. I didn't like Farouk at all. His age and unkempt appearance were major reasons. Half the day had passed in restless pacing when Ramiz and Rahim returned from college. Rahim went straight to his room while Ramiz sat at the dining table to eat, perhaps forgetting I was even in the house. As soon as I saw him, I rushed to take the food from the maid and sent her away to clean my room. When I placed the food in front of Ramiz, he looked up at me in shock, his face twisting in anger. "Don't come near me again," he snapped. "You're my father's wife, but you'll never be my mother." I replied, "Instead of being angry, just eat." Maybe he was too hungry because he ate in front of me. From then on, I started doing small tasks for Ramiz. Sometimes he would get furious. Other times he wouldn't respond at all. When Farouk was home, he kept me in his room. But in his absence, I fluttered around Ramiz like a butterfly. Farouk had warned me many times to stay away from his sons, but I couldn't help being drawn to Ramiz. My love for him grew day by day. I even learned his likes and dislikes. Ramiz never acknowledged me, but my heart was helpless. Since childhood, I had craved love. After my parents' death, the way my uncle and aunt treated me left me starved for affection. Seeing others happy in their lives made me burn with envy. I thought marriage would fill this void, but Farouk only kept me as a wife for his needs. He had no concern for my feelings or happiness. He would leave in the morning, return late at night, use me for his desires, and then forget about me. Rahim moved to another city for studies, leaving Ramiz behind. But he avoided me because the sight of me angered him, and I, knowing this, still went to him. The house had many servants, but I insisted on doing Ramiz's chores myself, ironing his clothes, cooking for him, taking over even the smallest tasks from the servants. One day, no one was home. Farouk had gone out of town for work, Rahim wasn't there, and the two maids had taken the day off. With nothing to do, I lay quietly in my room. Then, to my shock, Ramiz entered my room. I sat up, overjoyed. Seeing him made me feel alive. Otherwise, my life had nothing left. Farouk showered me with love, but I felt nothing for him. Love only matters when it comes from the one you desire, and that was my situation. I only wanted Ramiz's love, and today it felt like my wait was over. Ramiz walked slowly toward me, and what he did next made the ground vanish beneath my feet. I could never have imagined Ramiz would do something like this. He hated me to the core, and in that hatred, he took a step I couldn't have fathomed. Suddenly, he tore open his shirt, grabbed my hands, and pressed them against his neck, leaving marks. All the while, he kept saying, "Let me go. Don't do this. You're in my mother's place. This isn't right for you. I may hate you, but that doesn't mean I'll betray my father. I can't form any relationship with you because the only bond between us is that of mother and son." I stared at him, bewildered, unable to comprehend what he was doing. He made it look like I had attacked him. As I tried to stop him, my blood ran cold. Farouk stood at the door, glaring at me with furious eyes. By the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. Farouk hadn't gone out of town. He had returned home. I didn't know, but Ramiz did, and he had used it to his advantage. He knew I had feelings for him, which was why he came to my room. He knew I wouldn't make a scene. He succeeded in exactly what he wanted. Farouk stormed in and slapped me so hard I fell face first onto the bed. He kicked me relentlessly. Ramiz tried to stop him, but Farouk was beyond reason. "Let her go, Dad," Ramiz pleaded. "Auntie made a mistake. I only came to ask why you hadn't returned yet. But maybe I was wrong to come here." Farouk, still raging, said, "Yes, this wretched woman knew I was supposed to be away. She took advantage. I took her in out of pity, and she dragged my honor through the mud." Farouk refused to listen to me. When his anger subsided slightly, Ramiz led him out of the room, preventing me from explaining. Before leaving, Farouk ordered me to pack my things and leave immediately. As he walked away, he uttered the 3 words of divorce, leaving me stunned. What Ramiz did to me left me unable to even look at myself in the mirror. How could someone so beautiful on the outside be so ugly inside? I couldn't have imagined it even in death. In his hatred, he burned me to ashes, leaving me with nowhere to hide. I tried to tell Farouk the truth, but Ramiz stood between us like a wall. Crying, I packed my things and returned to my uncle's house. Seeing me at the door at night with my belongings made my frail grandmother collapse. When I told her everything, she couldn't bear it and suffered a heart attack. With great difficulty, my grandmother had arranged a place where I could live with dignity, but I was driven out from there too. When my aunt found out, she made a huge scene, tearing my character to shreds. By the next day, the whole neighborhood knew I had been divorced because of my black deeds and had returned to burden my uncle. My grandmother remained in the government hospital for 2 days. Despite being in my waiting period, Idat, I stayed with her, but my uncle and aunt didn't even glance our way. They blamed my grandmother too. My aunt said if she hadn't taken responsibility for me, she wouldn't be facing this disgrace today. My grandmother's condition worsened by the hour. 2 days later, the doctors apologized, saying they couldn't save her. My entire world, my grandmother, was gone, and I didn't know what fate had in store for me next. Ramiz hadn't just destroyed my home, he had caused my grandmother's death. After her burial, my aunt blamed me for it too, saying my bad luck had devoured my parents, my home, and now my grandmother. My aunt reduced me to a servant. I worked all day and was given only 1 meal. She had always been my enemy, but my grandmother's presence had forced her to behave. Now, with no one to stop her, her cruelty knew no bounds. My uncle blindly followed her. Days passed like this. My waiting period ended. At 17, I was already branded a divorcee. My only fault was failing to control my emotions. My heart had naturally gravitated toward someone my own age, but I had never intended to act inappropriately. Even after my Idat, nothing changed. I worked silently all day. I had learned how society treats orphaned, helpless girls. My uncle and aunt were preparing to move to America to live with their son, who had married an American girl years ago and never returned. My presence was an obstacle, so my aunt decided to marry me off as soon as possible. She didn't care about my feelings. She just wanted me out of the way. One evening, she casually told me, "Your nikah is tonight." A proposal came, and I accepted. "You're getting married simply." Despite my protests, she threatened to throw me out if I refused. Terrified of being left with no support, I signed the marriage papers without even knowing who I was marrying. At 17, I was living a life with no dreams, no desire for happiness, just dragging myself through each day. I had barely been sitting in my room when I heard footsteps. My blood turned to ice when I saw my groom. It was Ramiz. He sat at my feet, begging for forgiveness while I stared at him in horror. I could never have imagined becoming Ramiz's bride. He said he hadn't had a moment's peace since what he did to me. He had been burning in invisible fire, tormented by guilt. He wasn't a bad person, but seeing me in his mother's place had consumed him with jealousy. Clasping his hands, he said, when he learned my grandmother had died from the shock, he had been living on thorns. Unable to bear his conscience's torment, he confessed everything to his father, who forgave him but told him, "If you want to redeem yourself, give shelter to the orphan girl you ruined." Ramiz regretted his actions, and his tears convinced me he had suffered enough. So I forgave him. He kept me in a separate house where Farouk didn't live. Ramiz was a good person. He just couldn't bear seeing me replace his mother. He tried to make up for his cruelty, taking such care of me that it sometimes left me stunned. Days passed. Then one day, my aunt suddenly appeared at my door and the ground slipped from beneath my feet again. She fell at my feet, begging for forgiveness. Bewildered, I listened as she wept, saying her only son had disowned her. When she and my uncle reached America, her daughter-in-law refused to let them into the house. Her son put them in a hotel for a few days before sending them back to Pakistan, saying, "Don't come to see me again. If I miss you, I'll visit Pakistan myself." The son she had been so proud of had abandoned her. Her pride had turned to dust. "I spent my life calling you an orphan, and now I'm the one left helpless in old age," she cried. I had suffered for years, but God had written happiness in my fate, which came to me in time. Those who wronged me faced his justice. I truly forgave not just Ramiz, but also my uncle and aunt. When God gave me my share of joy, it was my duty to give others their peace. So, friends, that was today's story. If you liked it, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.